All right. Happy Sunday. Good to see everybody here. Well, anyone who happens to show up to watch it live. I'm not sure. I don't usually go live on Sunday mornings, but it's been kind of a weird week and a stranger weekend. So, and it's Memorial Day weekend. I've got some extended time off, and had some free time this morning. So I figured, what the hell. Um, so yeah. So I'm going to be touching on a weirder issue here. This was actually the issue that I'm going to be talking about is kind of David Falk's kerfuffle in social media this goes back to January, so I'm way late getting to this, but some of it is kind of, I don't know, it's kind of reverberated throughout some of the different areas of social media that I get involved in. And I didn't hear about this right when it happened. I think when I first heard about it, it was someone responding to David Falk's comments. So there was, as the description says, David Falk was asked a question on a live stream he did. He responded. It wasn't taken well. People criticized his take on it, and things kind of built up from there. And there was kind of a back and forth on Twitter and on YouTube, and people making takes on it. What I saw, I think, initially was a video from Dan McClellan, and I'm going to be showing that one and commenting through that one to kind of get, so this will start making sense. And then the response from, because I think I first saw tweets about it, and it was all out of context. I'm like, what the hell happened? Who said what to who now? What's going on? And I think the first tweets that I saw were from Dan McClellan and Kip Davis. And so what had happened was, and they were the ones kind of tweeting. Maybe it wasn't Kip Davis, but there was others kind of tweeting at David Falk, because David Falk had said this offensive stuff about Dr. Francesca Stavrakopoulou. So for anyone who doesn't know this whole thing, it really just kind of involves a few players. David Falk is a YouTuber who runs he's an Egyptologist, and he has an Ancient Egypt and the Bible YouTube channel. And he hosts like live streams and stuff like that. He's fairly active, and he is a Christian. I don't know what denomination or kind of bent. I think he tends to be more towards the kind of conservative, traditional type. He used to hang out with Smokey Saint before Smokey Saint had to disappear himself for being an indicted sex pest and convicted sex pest. So occasionally, I would see Falk in those circles over there with Smokey Saint and guys like Nicholas Whitmire. Then there's obviously Dr. Francesca Stavrakopoulou, who wrote a book called God, an Anatomy. She is a professor over at Exeter, and Oxford educated, biblical scholar. And that book has some claims in it, cites some scholarship that some of these guys have responded really unusually to, like ancient Near Eastern depictions or ancient Near Eastern ideas that God actually had a body and maybe even had a penis, things like this, which these people are kind of debating back and forth. Kip Davis gets involved in this a little bit because Pinecreek has him on. Pinecreek, after kind of hearing about this kerfuffle going on, I don't know that he ever talks with Dan McClellan. Dan McClellan's also he's a TikTok user and a YouTuber and a biblical scholar, and I believe one of his advisors is Dr. Stavrakopoulou. And so he was he made sort of the initial critical TikTok videos and YouTube videos and he directed them at David Falk and called him out for. He said they were misogynistic, and I agree with him. I think they're misogynistic too, and I'm going to go into why I think that is. And then Kip Davis kind of gets involved in later. Pinecreek has a conversation with Kip Davis on one of his channels, and on his main channel, and during one of his shows. And Kip Davis kind of comes in there to respond to, mostly he's talking about another YouTuber named Rob of Sentinel Apologetics, but it overlaps with comments that Rob made about Dr. Stavrakopoulou's cited research in her book. So this seems to be kind of, so for whatever reason, Stavrakopoulou's book, which was intended for lay audiences, the mainstream audiences that might be, she's doing kind of a Bart Ehrman thing. This really kind of ruffled some feathers, which I think is weird, because I think we're past the point where if Bart Ehrman were to write a book like this and he cited this kind of stuff, I don't think anyone would have cared. I mean, they would have been like, "Oh, that's Bart Ehrman for you, trying to turn people, trying to lead people to hell, or something like that." You'd get that reaction. But the reaction to Stavrakopoulou, I thought was interesting, because that's where we go from there. So let me take a look at what's going on in the comments. and there was a time discrepancy getting this thing started for a live stream. Was supposed to set it at 10:30. Just as I was getting it set up, I was wrapping things up, getting things set up and ready to go. My ISP dips out. I get a notification on my phone because that's going through 5G or whatever, 4G. And yeah, sure enough, but they got it fixed quickly. So I thought they said they wouldn't have it fixed until around noon. They've got it up and running. So, but if I do dip out, apologies in advance. You'll know why. That's why. Pinworm, good to see you. Repo Sandman. Gray Knight, rip Jeff's internet connection, should never have crossed Doug. Exactly. Warren, Daisy, Space Lord 75, Darth Bonson, Daisy again, good to see you. Wise Parsley, I don't know if I know you. I don't know that. Well, I'm sure you've watched my. This sounds like you've watched them before, but yeah, good to see you live. Pinecreek will know God again. Well, I don't know. As a Mennonite, I don't know. I don't know if he's going to be going back. Joel, good to see you. Head away. Let's see here. Jefferson, are you going to comment on the scandal around Jack Angstreich, whose chat logs reveal he is a pedophile? I haven't heard anything about it. I have no idea. I don't hang out on Clubhouse much. When I do go in there to check, it's to check on like if somebody suggests that there's a replay out there that they think I might be interested in, go watch it. I haven't seen or heard anything with Jack Angstreich in it since I can't even remember when the last time I saw him in one. I know he's banned by. Well, he's always banned by Darth Dawkins, but yeah, I didn't think that he was that active in Clubhouse. Or are you going to defend him? Like, I don't know that Tom Rabbit's even defending. I have no idea what you're talking about, Warren. I have not heard anything about this. No clue. Kent Hovind, CPA. KCA Randy, good to see you. Jeff, did you see the evil question DD couldn't answer? Yeah, I'm gonna be talking about that one. I'm gonna combine that with a couple other short bits and pieces of Darth stuff later on when I do my next Darth thing. Let's see. And let's see here. All right. I think that's about everybody that's here in the live chat. Yeah, again, Warren, I have no idea what's going on with that. I can't defend or call out behavior that I'm not aware of. I don't know what's going on with that, nor do I really care. I don't like Angstreich that much. I don't like his approach to things. I agree with him a lot on philosophical stuff. I think he's very strong in that, but I don't. He gets just as worked up and just as angry and just as bullying and just as condescending and patronizing as somebody like Darth Dawkins does. He's not. As long as you don't. No, I can't say that because that's just kind of stupid. That's almost like saying, well, as long as you kiss Darth's ass, he won't blow up at you. But that's not true. And in Angstreich's case, I don't know which one. But Angstreich, I think, ends up in that same kind of gatekeeping. Like, I know philosophy better than you, so I'm not going to have this conversation unless I can run a test on you to find out if these six jargon, 6 words of philosopher jargon before we can continue. Not to say that he always does that. I've seen him in when he's calm and not ticked off at somebody, go through and have kind of just a regular plain English explanation of philosophy. But oftentimes what ends up happening is that person, if they're a believer, will run out, do a quick look, get into some philosophical terms, come running right back to Jack, and then it gets ugly. So I don't think those are very productive. Doubting Time, was good to see you. Oh boy, Sunday afternoon. I hope you were well, Jefferson. Yeah, I'm doing okay. A lot of grilling. It's Memorial Day. It's America. A lot of meat eating. Ugh. Trying to eat more vegetables and stuff. All right, so let's get into this. So I've been puzzling about how to actually play this one off. I have a duty to look into this as an observer of the Darthiverse. I don't know that I would. I think that's going a little far, saying it's my duty. I don't like. Darth has done everything in his power to stay away from Jack Angstreich. So the two of them hardly ever interact. At this point, the last time I heard about any interaction between them was by proxy, because I think Jack Angstreich months ago, uh, and by months I think this might have been last year, I think was in a clubhouse room and talked to somebody who was kind of running a precept type argument. And I don't know if Tom Rabbit did a video on it, but that preceptor ended up in a room with Darth and they were talking about him. And Darth just ran his usual stuff. Jack Angstreich is evil and a stalker and all that kind of stuff. He nothing new, no new information there. So yeah, I don't think I don't have a duty to seek it out. It sounds like a lot of drama. If there's something criminal going on, I definitely don't care to get involved in it, because that sounds like that's going to be for somebody beyond my pay grade and something outside the realms of social media discourse. So I'd rather not get involved in that. But yeah, no, if stuff comes out and it turns out to be substantiated or true, then yeah, that's terrible, and people need to do what they think is appropriate. So that's it. All right. So let's see here. Anyway, getting back to the topic of this, I wanted to kind of set this off. It's weird to kind of put this into context, because this kind of trickled out in and around the end of January going into February. That's when this all kind of like bubbled up to the top. And a lot of allegations were made, not only, I mean, there were people that were coming out and responding sometimes sometimes a little bit more emotionally than others about what David Falk said about Dr. Stavrakopoulou, which I'm going to play. What unfortunately I can't do, and I've left all the receipts in the description. All the video links that I'm going to be showing you are there. The one thing that I find interesting is that if I go, let's get this shared now, get this up. If I show you this part here, this is Pinecreek's video. Don't hate me for being beautiful. Francesca Stavrakopoulou versus David Falk. This is not a good video. And when I saw this, this was the one that initially this is the one that kind of inspired me to look more into some of the takes that Pinecreek was doing, because I thought this one was really dishonest. The reason that I bring it up is because if you look down here in the clips, there's clips from 2015 on this, and there's clips from David Falk here. Now, when we get to this particular, I'm going to play this after I play the McClellan one and go through that one a little bit. The original video of Dr. David Falk is not available. He does live streams and he numbers them, and I'm about 95% certain that this one would have come from live stream number 89. And if you go into his channel, in fact, I can do that right now. Go in here, we'll go into videos, we'll go into live. And you can see he's up to 108 as of a day ago. If you go down here, 86, 87, 88, 90. 89 is conspicuously absent. That's the one. So it's private. So you can't actually, I can't pull that up and play it, directly from the original source. The best I've got, the longest clip that I think I have straight through, is McClellan's. And normally I wouldn't want to do it that way, but it's the only way I can actually show the bulk of what David Falk said, even though it's cut up and interspersed with Dan's comments. So we're going to try going with that one. I can delete this now because I've shown everything I need here. Let's see. Response to David Falk's misogyny. This was the one. So I'm going to play this one, and I am really kind of curious about this too. I don't have a lot of viewers on my channel that are women, but the few of you that are out there, I am very, very curious to get not just your initial reaction to this, but if you stop and think about it and do an analysis of it, to what extent do you think that David Falk's comments here rise to the level of quote unquote misogyny? Because there seems to be kind of a discrepancy, or a lot of variations of what people think is misogyny, and whether or not his comments rise to it. And so we'll see what happens with that. Warren, if you continue talking about Jack Angstreich's drama, I'm gonna you keep dropping that word in there, and you're gonna get my live chat booted. And I kind of think that maybe that's why you're doing it. Stop talking about that topic, or I'm going to ban you again. I had to ban you last time and I brought you back because of the creepy comments you were making about trans issues before. Stop talking about this drama. I don't know what's going on there, and you don't need to be bringing this up here. It's not on topic. If you want to do a show about Jack Angstreich's past or sordid details of whatever's been found out on Clubhouse, then go ahead and do that, or start that up someplace else. That's not the topic here. Knock that off. All right. Here we go. I'm going to shrink myself down. I'm going to start playing this one. That's a pretty one. This is Dan McClellan. Like I said, this he's got his YouTube channel. He is a biblical scholar. I think he's a PhD in training. And full disclosure, he mentions this, that Dr. Stavrakopoulou is one of his advisors. Is the there's no audio? Okay, I had a feeling it was going to do that. All right, let me rewind this. I thought StreamYard had fixed that. Let me stop that screen, and I'm just going to have to share these one tab at a time then. I don't know why it does that, but okay, here we go. Thank you, everybody, for letting me know. I think Floyd was the first one. Thank you, Floyd.
Pablo Andres for $4.99. Thank you very much for the super chat. He says, great reputation of atheologica. What are your thoughts on Francesca Stavrakopoulou's work?
All right, let's see it. And also it's pronounced Stavrakopoulou.
Okay. Now that would be difficult to pronounce if you didn't know how to do it.
Which you didn't.
Stavrakopoulou she's fringe. Okay, she's out there. You know, she thinks that, for example, redemption of the firstborn in the Torah is child sacrifice.
So this is inaccurate. She does not think that redemption is about child sacrifice. The redemption is a later attempt to overturn the command to sacrifice the firstborn, which is found in Exodus 22:28. And Ezekiel also suggests that that is about child sacrifice. And that is not fringe in any way, shape, or form. That is the academic consensus.
If you watch enough of Dan's videos, if you make a drinking game out of, like, take a drink every time he says any way, shape, or form, you will get hammered quickly. It's a common one from him.
And here are some books that you can check out about that.
A paper, kind of a dusty one. The Death and Resurrection of the Beloved Son, Human Sacrifice in Jewish and Child Sacrifice in Ancient Israel. Oof.
She thinks God had a body in the ancient Near East.
Also the overwhelming academic consensus.
Body's embodiment and theology of the Hebrew Bible. A human-shaped God, theology of an embodied God. The embodied God. God's body. God's body again. The bodies of God in the world of ancient Israel.
Well, you know.
So, yeah, there seems to be quite a bit of research on that. Now, keep in mind, too, David Falk is an Egyptologist. So when he does this thing, Egypt and the ancient Egypt and the Bible thing, and he is a believer, but when he tries to get into some of this other kind of stuff where he's like criticizing somebody else, he is criticizing somebody in a very different field. And it needs to be mentioned that they are very different. I think it's and Falk, I think, seems to kind of get lazy about this kind of stuff. When it suits him, he's like, "Oh yeah, I'm an Egyptologist, so I study kind of a part of the ancient Near East." Sure, but there's certain things that maybe aren't in your exact area of expertise. I mean, Dr. Joel Bowen, Dr. Josh Bowen, he does the same thing. He's an Assyriologist specifically, so it's narrowly concentrated in that. But there is some overlap with some of these other people. But he usually presents their research as their research. And normally I don't know that he's ever said that. I don't know that I've ever heard him, and I've talked with him, I've interviewed him, that he's ever said, I don't like this person's research. He'll tell me that person's particular research is based on my conversations with people in that field. That person's research is not well respected, or it's considered odd, or it's not. There's just not enough data to document it, so it just sort of sits there. He'll usually do that. He doesn't do what Falk's about to do here. And yeah, Floyd, yeah, she's not fringe. I don't even know why. I mean, for Falk, I think that she would be considered fringe if there's some kind of Christian theological take that they think she's trying to push through the book. Who knows? He doesn't really get into that. It takes a weirder turn.
I can see where she could get that idea, but it's still kind of odd.
It's not odd in any way, shape, or form.
She has some very, very weird ideas.
So far, you've listed 2 ideas. You misrepresented one of them, and both of them are the academic consensus.
So I don't have a high opinion of her work.
Really doesn't entirely matter. Like, I mean, he's just giving a subjective opinion, but it's like, okay, what do other people in the field actually think about her work? Like, okay, one Egyptologist, Dr. Falk's like, I don't have a high opinion of her work. Okay. I don't know what that means. Like, you'd have to take that with the,
I never have had a high opinion of her work. I think it's there's just some stuff that she does, especially that child sacrificing. I think that's just crazy. Right. And the whole purpose of the redemption fee is so you don't sacrifice your kids. So the idea that it means really sacrifice is sort of flipping the meaning of the text on its head.
No, you just misunderstand the scholarship because you are not a specialist in the Hebrew Bible.
So I don't care for her work. I don't care for her work in the slightest. But I also think she's kind of a waste of time too. She's window dressing.
Okay. She's window dressing. First accusation, right? Like, I think she's a waste of time. Cool. She's window dressing. Classic kind of chauvinist sexist statement about a woman in any profession. It reminds me of the scene. There's a conversation in the movie In the Line of Fire with Clint Eastwood and Rene Russo, and the two of them are sitting there, and they're both Secret Service agents. And while they're sitting there, Eastwood's this hard-bitten guy. He was there when JFK got shot. He's still haunted by Secret Service's failure, his own personal failures, because he's one of those classic Hollywood narcissistic heroes that can't let this shit go. But that, for whatever reason, that's billed as a virtue. Anyway, he's having a conversation with Rene Russo, and Rene Russo's character says something. They're having a conversation about her being a woman and an agent, and he describes it's window dressing. The president wants you out there front and center to appeal to his feminist voters. Right. It's pretty sexist. It turns out she's actually very, of course the movie ends up having to do this thing. She's a very capable Secret Service agent, but Clint Eastwood's got to, grumble about something. I got all these kids today. Something like that.
She's theological window dressing. She's basically attractive. And that's why she's always featured on, say, BBC shows.
I don't know how often she's actually featured on BBC shows. If you look her up, there's a decent amount of coverage. I think she's been on a couple of different ones where they've asked her about like ancient, Old Testament kind of stuff, because that's her specialty is really the Hebrew Bible. I don't know that she's on it that often. Then again, I'm not in the UK, so maybe, and I don't live in Canada. Maybe Canada has access to more BBC feeds, and you can see Stavrakopoulou everywhere. Who knows?
Because she's one of the few theologians that doesn't look like an old gray man who's dusty around the ears.
I'm sure there's a superficial dickhead producer at BBC who's probably thought the exact same thing that Falk has said here. So Falk could be completely accurate in the fact that, like, you know what? I bet there's some BBC staff here. This is their line of thinking over there. Yeah, they're still sexist and ageist, if that's how they're going with it. But you know, they're TV producers. They might be creeps and superficial assholes. But you know, this is not. And there's a little bit of sleight of hand that happens here. Well, because of this kind of sloppy stumbling through a lot of different sexist tropes. This is going to give Pinecreek later in his defense an opportunity to razzle dazzle away from where David Falk really sticks it, where he really gets it wrong.
That's going to get you an audience, and not to be crass about this.
You're already being crass about this.
But
Great.
when you start doing theology by cup size, that's a bad start.
Mispronouncing her name was a bad start. Getting her scholarship wrong and laughing at your misunderstanding of her scholarship was a bad start. Wildly misunderstanding the academic consensuses within the field of Hebrew Bible was a bad start. Saying that she's doing theology by cup size is abhorrent and misogynistic. And
okay, so Dan's landed out there. That comment right there is abhorrent and misogynistic. I think that was the one that captured most people's attention. The one that captured my attention was the window dressing one, mostly because that's old school, but also because it implies that there's something going on here, either by Stavrakopoulou or by well-wishers of Stavrakopoulou, or some combination of them and BBC, to put something out there to bamboozle people. There's a weird, like, she's window dressing, so she's the face, she's the charismatic presenter of this kind of this sort of broken theology. And if you follow this, like, what's going to happen? I'm used to hearing this kind of stuff, or at least I'm used to having nightmares about my time in fundamentalist conservative churches where people would talk like this, because those were the stakes. Somebody was doing this and presenting this, and it was all a conspiracy, inevitably, to lead your kid directly into hell. So, I always put like a pin in it when I hear somebody talking like that. And I don't know that I've ever heard Falk say anything quite that crazy, but again, he hung out with people like Smokey Saint and stuff for giggles, on YouTube and stuff. So I'm not trying to say he's guilty by association, but some of the commentary and some of the conversations I would hear from these guys, these were not enlightened conversations. They were gross. So I'll leave that there.
And this is absolutely pathetic. Francesca Stavrakopoulou has had to deal with men dismissing her and her scholarship only because she's a woman absolutely every single day, and frequently from much more competent people, which is pathetic in and of itself. But this creator is not a specialist in this field, is not even competent in this field. His degree is in Egyptology. And this reminds me of something that Kenton Sparks wrote in his wonderful book, God's Word and Human Words.
I think this is an interesting
point. That he came up as an evangelical scholar, but he mentioned that a lot of evangelicals get degrees in what he called the soft field. So things that were on the periphery of the critical study of the Bible, but did not require people actually critically study the Bible in their degrees.
I think it's funny that would actually hold to. It's actually kind of impressive, because I don't think most people would think of Egyptology. If you get a PhD in Egyptology, people are going to be like, "Oh, I see you went for the safe major, huh?" I mean, no one's going to really think that. But as an evangelical, if you are trying to kind of preserve you want to be able to, you want to have the credentials in something in ancient historical studies to get you adjacent to it, but you don't want to have to actually approach some of the crazy liberal biblical scholars that might blow up your faith. And that's the way that you would do it. And I thought that was an interesting. I've always kind of suspected that maybe some people that would factor into it, maybe even unconsciously for them. But I can't remember who we mentioned. It was Kenton something who mentioned this idea. And I think that's interesting that, if you're dealing with somebody who's sort of trying to preserve, they're academically minded and they're ambitious enough and they're motivated enough, driven enough to pursue a PhD in something in ancient history. But, and Falk's channel is kind of like this too, where he wants to talk about these kinds of theological issues. And if somebody wants to bring him in there to talk about like Exodus happening or something like that, he's more than happy to kind of to lean on it. And that's when he kind of ends up butting heads with some other, scholars of the Torah. So,
and that way their faith is not challenged. And then when they get the PhD, they can then go wave it around as a sign of their authority. But then they go back into the study of the Bible and pretend to critique the critical study of the Bible without being knowledgeable about it at all.
So, and it's really clear that that's what they're doing with this.
That's what they're doing with this. This is the part that I really want you all to, for those of you who are actually going to stick around for this until the next couple of videos, keep an eye on this part. So that's what they're doing. That's what he just said. Who's they? Now it's getting conspiratorial. It's not just about her. That's what they're doing. She's window dressing. The BBC doesn't have any real reason to dress any of this stuff up, other than to maybe get ratings. But at the same time, that they were able to do this with, getting Dawkins on there to talk about some hot, you get Dawkins on there and a Muslim apologist and have them argue at each other for 20 minutes. You'll get all the fireworks you need for a BBC, or Channel 4 panel show or something like that. So this idea, so he's putting this out there. This is what they're doing.
So, and she plays it too. She plays it too. It's not like she isn't doing this.
Isn't doing what? She's coasting on her good looks. That's what he's saying. If you take this all in, and I'll put this out there to any women that are watching this and any women that watch this later, I don't think it's unfair for me to paraphrase the gist of his criticism toward her. Leave out whatever the BBC may be involved in, or in this they and them stuff. She is not, in his estimation, a particularly good scholar. Her scholarship is wanting, and she is coasting on her good looks. She's passing on her good looks, and she's actually trying to magnify mediocre work with the fact that she is a charismatic and photogenic presenter because she has a nice smile and long hair and cup size, his words. She's got tits. So apparently this is a problem. She's not a great scholar. She's a woman trying to pass on her looks. So this is shameful. I'm going to get into some of this later on because this is, I think, the central criticism, and that is the part. Daisy's asking, play that last bit again. Okay.
Critical study of the Bible without being knowledgeable about it at all.
So, and it's really clear that that's what they're doing with this. So, and she plays it too. She plays it too. It's not like she isn't doing this. So again, I think her work is atrocious. I think how she presents herself is not as a serious scholar. And she's really on the periphery of, say, liberal theology. So I don't have anything more to say than that.
And you've done enough damage to yourself as it is. I mean, holy shit. So there it is. And like, she plays it too. That's the whole thing. They're doing this and she plays it too. And there's no way she's not doing it. So he's pretty heavily implying like she's in on this. She understands what she's doing. She's aware that her scholarship is probably lacking. And she is passing on her good looks to inflate otherwise mediocre or, and he just said, atrocious scholarship. And the BBC's willing to let her go with it. So either she and crew at Exeter are bamboozling the BBC because the BBC will take anyone who's relatively attractive and anything they want to present and make a TV show out of it, apparently. According to, David Falk isn't just insulting. He's not just being sexist. and misogynistic towards Dr. Stavrakopoulou. He's also being incredibly insulting to anyone involved in BBC television, because apparently all it takes is you have a nice smile and boom, you're on there. I don't care what you talk about. Let's go. Like, I don't know if BBC is doing lots of Ancient Aliens kind of stuff, like Aliens did it, but I mean, if they are, maybe there is something to that claim. But without having to get into whether or not the BBC is responsible or whatever the hell is going on here, he is right here holding her personally responsible for coasting on atrocious or mediocre, not impressive. Because he started off that he's not impressed, he thinks she's a waste of time, and now he's gotten worked up enough to use the word atrocious. Her atrocious scholarship, and she's sort of coasting on the fact that she's good looking. And this is a horrible way to handle theology, because they're just letting a pretty face get away with murdering the research. And you need to get her out of there. She's not serious. All of the bells are ringing. Every single alarm that you need to like get triggered in terms of like, is this sexism? Absolutely. Is it chauvinism? Absolutely. Those two words are usually softer words to label at somebody who's talking like this. Do they meet the level of misogyny? It depends on what you think about that word in theory. I think it does. But then again, I also don't think that misogyny means that you have to hate all women and that you have to hate the specific woman that you're being misogynistic about. I'll get more into that in a minute. So I'll play the rest of this where Dan wraps it up.
So Falk is profoundly uninformed about the academic study of the Bible and the Hebrew Bible more specifically. It's not his specialization. He's never really had to demonstrate any real proficiency in it. But he's performing for an audience that's even less informed than he. And so he does not have to demonstrate proficiency. He just has to make his audience feel validated in their dogmatism, and having a PhD in any field that is even tangentially related to this is authority enough for him to be able to make pronouncements that make them feel validated in that dogmatism. And here he reveals his rank and pathetic misogyny too.
Pablo Andre.
So that's it for that one. So so that was the initial one that I think I'd seen bits and pieces of that, but I'd heard it tweeted about. And I was like, oh, and I knew who David Falk was because I had seen David Falk months before do a criticism video on his channel about Dr. Bowen. And I think he was like doing one of his popcorn reviews, and it was Dr. Josh Bowen and Skylar Fiction on Skylar's channel, I think, having a discussion about something. And he was trying, and I don't know if it was like biblical slavery or what they were talking about, but he had lots of, Falk had lots of thoughts. So, all right, let me stop that one. And now we're going to move on to Pinecreek's take. All right, here we go. So, and this was done afterward. Now, what I will point out is that he says, see my pinned comment for my take. Don't hate me for being beautiful. Francesca Stavrakopoulou versus David Falk. Many of you have probably seen this, but... So Pinecreek wrote, this is a case where there is an academic disagreement, which Dr. Stavrakopoulou has no problem. Actually, you know what? No. I'll read that after we do this, because there's some points in there that are not good. Here we go.
Stavrakopoulou she's fringe. Okay, she's out there. She thinks that, for example, redemption of the firstborn in the Torah is child sacrifice. She thinks God had a body in the ancient Near East. Okay, well, I can see where she could get that idea, but it's still kind of odd. So I don't have a high opinion of her work. I never have had a high opinion of her work.
He disagreed with me on certain academic points. That's fair enough. I don't mind him disagreeing. He was wrong on those academic points, but that's not story.
She's window dressed.
Okay. So what he's just doing right there, just to give this full context, and he did, kind of. But to be fair here, the video that he's drawing from is 8 years old. It's from 2015, and he's got the clip down there. And most of the clips that he's taken out, he's kind of going to splice these in, and sort of juxtapose these against some of the things that Dr. Falk is saying. I'll play the rest of this thing through, and then I'm going to comment on those. I think there's 3 or 4 bits of Dr. Stavrakopoulou from here. When taken in context, they don't mean what Pinecreek thinks they mean.
Dressing. She's theological window dressing. She's basically attractive. And that's why she's always featured on, say, BBC shows. It's because she's one of the few theologians that doesn't look like an old gray man who's dusty around the ears. You know, that's going to get you an audience.
There's more I'd like to do. Whether there's a space for it or not, I think in terms of TV, it's always going to be a caricature. Everything you see on TV is always about, unlike something like radio. When you're listening to radio, you could be doing other stuff, you could be doing the ironing, washing up, driving, whatever. So they're not particularly concerned about keeping your attention. They know you're going to keep listening.
I will warn you, if you read the subtitles for this particular bit, they're absolutely awful. They'll just throw you off.
And you can be doing other stuff. With TV, there's always the kind of 3-4 second rule. Someone will be flicking, like, right, I'm not interested in this, I'll turn over. And so if TV necessarily has to be a more visual element, then it has to be necessarily about content and debate.
Not to be crass about this, but when you start doing theology by cup size, that's a bad start.
If the BBC had happened to, they approached me, I mean, despite a lot of people saying, oh, they only asked you because you're a woman, and one person said, it's because you've got a nice smile, they want to be on telly. Actually, it's because I'm bloody good at my job, and I know what I'm talking about.
I think how she presents herself is not as a serious scholar, and she's really on the periphery of, say, liberal theology.
Notice what he left off. So the 3 things that he goes into there, if you go in and watch this video, and I'll address Grey Knight here. It's obviously not possible to prove what's in this man's heart, but his mouth is telling me nonstop that he's discounting her professional opinions because she's an attractive woman. Yeah. And that's pretty obvious. I think the idea, like with misogyny, is this idea of like getting guys over on thought crime. And I'm gonna give my explanation for what I think is going on with that term. And I'm probably wrong about it, but anyway. So she, in the first 3 responses, the one where she's talking about the guy that she had a disagreement with, I would advise that you go and watch that. If you look up the video, you can break them up into segments, and that one starts at about 36 minutes, and it's talking about academic gatekeeping in academia. And the person that she's specifically having, the story that she gives is that when she gave an interview, I think in a radio program, and it came through questions, it came out that she was an atheist, which is kind of unusual. She states that's unusual in the field in England because it kind of limits your ability to teach in certain places, because her particular academic discipline is still kind of heavily connected to either, Catholic institutions or Anglican institutions, things like that. So oftentimes people are getting into divinity schools, they're getting ordained, they have statements of faiths and all this kind of stuff. And she's not a believer. She's just doing this because she's interested in it. It's purely academic. So she brings this up, and during the course of the interview, and they found, oh, you're an atheist. This comes out later on. What she's actually talking about in terms of this letter, an individual that was ahead of her, not a peer, but, something of an elder, kind of in the same, I think at Oxford, wrote an open letter criticizing her. And it talked about like a TV or radio appearance, and it talked about her comments. It made references to her appearance, her dress, her hair. So she starts bringing this stuff up, and it was kind of interesting because this is 8 years ago, and it's almost as if she's kind of describing the big, some of David Falk's stuff. And then this guy makes a full-throated defense for why some of the things that she's presenting to lay audiences, to the common man, are things that would be better kept preserved in the ivory tower. That only the specialist should really be aware of this, because when this information gets out, if it gets out of context, then the hoi polloi just can't deal. So she uses this. That's what she's talking about in terms of this. So he's trying to use this as like, oh, well, this is just 2 academics having a disagreement. No. This was somebody who was actually her kind of a superior. I don't think she said that she actually took classes from this person, but this person was in a teaching position. She was an upcoming student, I think a graduate student. They knew each other. And when it came time to do this criticism, this was somebody in her field who's also kind of a specialist in these same areas. And his criticism wasn't of her research. They didn't have an academic disagreement either. His disagreement was her presenting these ideas and the way she presented them. She's a woman, she's wearing a dress, and she's out there trying to be smiley and charismatic, and she's sharing the stuff that we talk about and work hard over on these dusty books in our libraries. And this stuff doesn't belong out there. It belongs in the academy. So I'm not exactly sure why Doug took that particular clip out of context, other than to say, like, well, look, he's saying that he disagrees with her scholarship, and she's saying that she wouldn't mind if somebody disagrees with the scholarship, even though she kind of puts it off flippantly, like, he made some points about, where a scholarship got wrong. He's wrong, but whatever. That wasn't the point of what she was trying to say. She was talking about a man in the same field, not an Egyptologist, in the same field, criticizing her presentation of scholarship. And he even going so far as to not refer to her. I think she actually, by the time he wrote this, she's a doctor. And he didn't use any of her honorifics. He just referred to her as her nickname, which is what she was commonly known in that circle. It's a small circle, I would imagine, that particular. And she goes into that explanation. So it's worth giving that a listen. The other explanations after that, too, don't get any better. The one about I'll get into this portion here. Pinecreek wrote, this is a case where there's academic disagreement, which Dr. Stavrakopoulou has no problem. That wasn't the point of that statement, which I just explained, and took too long doing it. And where one man's opinion about one woman's beauty plays a role in TV appearances, which Dr. Stavrakopoulou admits TV is about visuals and that she has a nice smile and is good at her job. She didn't acknowledge that she had a nice smile, nor was she actually talking about that. The question, if you go and watch that, I think that's around minute 51. If you watch that, a person is asking about discussing the issues about religion and atheism, because the whole point of that thing is talking about like what it's like to be an atheist in this field. That's like her entire presentation. And she starts talking about how on television, there's a tendency to caricaturize atheism and faith traditions. If it's radio, you can have a long discussion, and as she says, people are multitasking. They're not as apt to turn away. They've got it on. They're listening to it for the duration. But if it's TV and people are flipping through, BBC producers are worried about like the person who's just channel surfing. You don't have to be, the participants on the panel show do not have to be in bikinis. They don't have to be attractive. What usually needs to happen is they need to have some kind of blood sport style, like, Islam versus the West or something like that. That'll, ooh, okay. They'll put a chyron down at the screen, anti-Semitic professor, whatever they can do to catch your eye and get you. They don't have to be attractive. She is in no way agreeing with this fact that she's going on there because she's pretty. She said someone said, oh, well, you should be on telly because you have a nice smile. She's like, I think it's because they have me on because I know what I'm talking about. I'm good at my job. So that doesn't stack up. In my opinion, going back to Doug, Doug's opinion, ignorance of academic work, jealousy of academic exposure, and just poor taste in wording is a better explanation than accusations of misogyny. But people like to be outraged and signal their virtue. So let's take that one at a time. Ignorance of academic work, which David Falk has. He doesn't understand what he's talking about. It's interesting that he says, this is a case where there is academic disagreement. And then he says, in my opinion, ignorance of academic work. So he doesn't have a disagreement with her work. He's ignorant and being disagreeable about it. So that's one defense that's kind of gone. Maybe don't present that so much. Maybe actually, talk about what's really bothering you. And by that, I mean Dr. Falk. Jealousy of academic exposure. He's implying that he's jealous of her her exposure on TV. It feels like that might be the case. Oh, you see, she's attractive and she's got bad scholarship, but she gets to go on BBC. I don't get anywhere near that attention. If they just let me, they just let Dr. Falk rip and run, all these people would be much better educated. That might be there, but you got to read into it to get there. You got to read into that a decent amount. So I don't know that he's necessarily like, where's the actual evidence that he's jealous of an absence of academic exposure? He's actually kind of foregone it. if you get into some of his other stuff, one of his books was written by a group that shuns peer review. They're considered kind of a predatory, kind of an aggressively weird, kind of fringe. I shouldn't use that word. That's kind of his word. Publishing group. They don't like peer review. So if anything, he's sort of kind of like stayed away from that in a little bit. So I don't know that this holds. And just poor taste in wording. Well, very poor taste in wording. But why those particular words? It's one thing to have poor taste in wording. It's another thing to choose the kinds of words that you did. Then accusations of misogyny. But he wrapped up and said she did it. She is doing this. She plays it. There's no way she's not doing this. What did he mean? Notice that that's cut out. Pinecreek didn't leave that part in. That's gone. And then he has to wrap it. People like to be outraged and signal their virtue. What exactly is Pinecreek doing here other than signaling his virtue? Like, hang on, folks. Hang on. I see what's going on here. And some of y'all got that moral outrage going, and you're accusing this ponytailed weirdo over here who's into Egypt of misogyny. And I don't think you should do that. I think you're virtue signaling, and you shouldn't do that. Like, okay. Are you maybe virtue signaling about how people shouldn't virtue signal with accusations of misogyny? Like, at what point is it okay to actually call it misogyny? If you want to say it's not misogyny, it's sexism or chauvinism, cool. But here's the problem with that. Words change in their meanings and their applications. And simply saying it's sexist or chauvinist really doesn't do all that much for you, especially when chauvinist has sort of really old-fashioned, almost romantic, patronizing tendencies to it. But misogyny really kind of gets across that here's a guy who's criticizing a woman's work and making as much of his criticism, 50% of that criticism is about how she looks and about how she's trading on her looks for her job. That's some repugnant shit. So, yeah. I don't think that some people do like to be outraged. But signaling their virtue, okay, maybe. So there could be some people doing that. But I don't know that McClellan is doing that. I didn't get the impression that this is virtue signaling, nor did I get some impression that people go on to say, well, these guys started just popping out of the wood and white knighting for her. Oh my God. Like, I don't know that they're white knighting for her. I think they're defending their own field. These, like Kip Davis and Dan, are in the same field, or very similar fields to Dr. Stavrakopoulou. So they're coming out and defending them. Like, this is just gross. We know her work. It's not fringe. Knock that off. That's not even a criticism. You're just being a jerk. And he was. And I don't think that they need to white knight for her anyway, because if she felt she needed to say anything to him, to Dr. Falk, she would have. I don't even know that she did. I think she could just flat out ignored this, because, I mean, from perspective of her career, this doesn't do anything. It doesn't mean a thing. The audience that David Falk Dr. Falk is talking to are only going to be interested in, for the most part, are only really interested in kind of a fundamentalist take on this. They want to get enough biblical scholarship so that they feel like they're well read, but they don't want to get into the weird stuff that starts to challenge assumptions that they have in their particular faith tradition. And all of them are going to have slightly different ones. So I did want to welcome Digital Gnosis is here. Hello. And Fenton writes, we can compartmentalize Doug's attributes as viewers. I take note of his ability to make theists comfortable discussing the foundation of their beliefs. Yeah, and I don't have, yeah, I mean, there's a couple of things about Doug's takes on atheism that I might be critical about, but for the most part, we probably agree more than we disagree. Even when it comes to certain political stuff, we probably agree on more. He likes to say this all the time. We probably agree more than we disagree. But in terms of this one, this just felt like, okay, Doug, if you're coming out here and trying to defend this guy, that's what it sounds like. And it's like, no, I don't think that you guys are accusing him the right way. Like, okay, then what was the better way to say this? It's not the case that he's just ignorant. It's ignorance of her academic work, or it's an academic disagreement. Well, which one is it? Because those do sound like they might be a little hard to reconcile with each other. Like, this isn't his field. He just doesn't like what she's talking about. Okay, why not? Well, she's got these weird ideas. They're not her ideas. She's presenting ideas from scholars. She put it in a book written for lay people. People used to do this all the people will do this, believers especially will do this with guys like Bart Ehrman and stuff like that. Like, oh, they present this just weird, crazy, outlandish. Like, it's not just theirs. They're not the only ones. Oftentimes when they're writing a book for a general audience, it's not their own research. It's often a compilation of lots of different pieces of they're trying to write kind of an essay for people to kind of get in as an introduction to various research and various studies on these issues. So, all right. And then let's see, I don't know. Yeah, I don't think I need to play this entire one, but I'll share it just because of what happened later. So this was about a month later. This is Dan responding to Dr. Falk putting some tweets out, kind of apology tweets. So.
Hey, everybody. I recently posted a video where I responded to Dr. David Falk's misogynistic and false attack on the scholarship and the character of Professor Francesca Stavrakopoulou on his YouTube channel, Ancient Egypt and the Bible. And he very clearly does not feel he has done anything wrong, but has posted a non-apology of sorts. So pause to read this.
So yeah, what he wrote here, last Friday, I made a comment regarding Francesca Stavrakopoulou. Doesn't say doctor. Some people have taken offense over my comments. I admit that my comment was rude and inflammatory. And in retrospect, I understand that it could have easily been taken the wrong way. No, it was taken as rude and inflammatory. I think people took it the right way. So I apologize to those whom I offended. The comment was never, I apologize to those whom I offended. You should apologize to everybody, not just the ones that were offended. The comment was never meant to imply that women are less capable as scholars or public intellects. Quite the opposite. No, your comment was that she was less competent and was using her looks to make up for that. It was about media outlets and sometimes women themselves using sexuality to promote and amplify a message to the general public. No, it wasn't. You said that her work was atrocious and that she was complicit in doing this with the BBC. So there's a little bit of conspiracy thinking going on top of that. But he did make sure to let people know at the end of his statement that she plays this, she's doing it. There's no way she's not doing it. That's what he said. A person's scholarship should not be dismissed because a person is attractive. Agreed. And a person's scholarship should also not be embraced because a person is attractive. Okay. Scholarship should be judged by its quality alone. Okay. But he wasn't in a position to really judge the quality of her scholarship. He's not in the field. So he's just trying to say, well, hey, you know, she's coming up with fringe stuff. It's not fringe. So he didn't even get this stuff right. I'm just trying to judge the I'm making this about the scholarship. Then why were you talking about her appearances on the BBC? Other than to maybe start implying this idea, well, the BBC gets bamboozled by these British think tanks, these ivory towers, and they push some dope like Stavrakopoulou out in front, right? Because she's got a big smile and long hair. She's not a dusty weirdo, you know, she doesn't look like Yoda, and we'll put her out there, and then she can be the spokesperson for all these crazy theological, antichrist, satanic, you know, just start uploading all of your favorite right-wing kind of, you know, Christian conspiracy fantasies into that. That's the plan. That's the scoop. Okay, well, that's a lot to put on everybody involved in this, and that's an interesting way to apologize. You don't understand. I didn't mean to say that women are bad at their jobs. I just meant to say that part is bad at her job, and she's the tip of the spear on this ideological conspiracy and this ideological war against Christianity. Ta-ta. Right? Like, that's what I read this is doing. Like, and I'm sorry for those of you who were wrong, you know, those of you who felt bad about it, but, you know, the truth hurts. I'm surprised he didn't put that in there.
No, in addition to the fact that
Let's see here, because Nathan's. Some of his concern is justified, and some of it is fueled by right-wing U.S. conspiracy type thinking. I think you're talking about Pinecreek. Falk was like super incelly and creepy, but also the responses to him were so blown out of proportion. Yeah, I don't know how many were blown out of proportion. I didn't see those, but I am going to get into a little bit of that because the ones that I saw kind of going back the other way were like, they canceled him. More about that in a second. It's far more nuanced than Pinecreek has the ability to grasp. Apparently, the scholarship has been shifting in this direction for the past 40 to 50 years. Beyond that, he's a motivated apologist. Yeah, in that he's kind of he's a motivated apologist, and that I think this is one of those things where he's motivated to play apologist for somebody like David Falk, so he can trigger libs or lefties. Or I don't know that Doug really makes a distinction between the two. Granted, she refuses to stop being conventionally attractive. Yeah, in a way that does seem kind of weird, right? Like she's able to be a scholar, but she's not good enough. I think she should just go back to being pretty. Like that's a pretty fucking horrible thing to say. And let's be fair here. I've heard women say things like this to and about men, exactly like that. Oh, you're fine, but you're simple, kind of thing. And like, if you weren't so easy on the eyes, people can easily do this, right? But David Falk really kind of leaned into this for it. There was a bit of a witch hunt type crowd psychology thing, and I do feel like it was fueled by lots of atheists with a political axe to grind. I think the appropriate responsibility is to be like, wow, what an incel, laugh at him and leave it at that. Yeah, kind of. That was kind of my reaction to it too, until Doug did this. Because if anything, what Doug did kind of made it worse. Because what Doug, I think, is trying to do at this point is be like, look, it's inappropriate to white knight for someone who's been at the other end of comments that you think might be misogynistic. But it might be okay to white knight for the person accused of being a misogynist. This seems like a weird take to me. This always seems like a little bit of a double standard. Like, and Doug has a history of kind of doing this. Is like, as long as I'm not passionate about it one way or the other, I'm right. Like, no, you're not. And I'm going to show how that doesn't work, because the best defense that Falk has here is that he's virtue signaling to misogynists.
That I'm sorry if you were offended is not actually an apology. Nobody's misunderstanding Dr. Falk. Nobody has accused Dr. Falk of claiming all women are incapable scholars. That's not what people mean when they say his rhetoric was misogynistic. To insist that misogyny must mean the hatred of or the rejection of the competencies of all women is a misogynistic conceptualization of misogyny that is based on an etymological fallacy. It's a conceptualization primarily deployed by men because it allows them to pull back the threshold of misogyny and excuse what they're doing as not misogyny. And it reifies the very systemic power asymmetries that most women observe misogyny to include, as well as their assumption, their reification, their defense, their deployment. Now, Dr. Falk had to reject Professor Stavrakopoulou's scholarship because he's an apologist. His channel is an apologetic channel. He is defending a worldview and a perspective on the Bible that is overwhelmingly rejected within the academic study of the Bible.
Yes, that's been one of the things that I think Falk has actually expressed frustration with acceptance of some of his expertise, especially on things like the Exodus, because of that. Because the actual biblical scholars have moved like, no, this is not it. And as an Egyptologist, Falk gets frustrated. Like, no, as an Egyptologist, I can tell you exactly. Like, no, you can't.
As well as by Professor Stavrakopoulou. So he had to reject her scholarship. And he starts off by rejecting it as fringe, naming two conclusions, not that accurately, that are espoused by Professor Stavrakopoulou. And once he realized he didn't really understand her scholarship well enough to say anything more than that, he, as Candida Moss astutely observed on Twitter, decided, let's just pivot to dismissing all of her scholarship outright as the product of her attractiveness.
Yeah, I don't know if that's entirely fair either. I mean, he definitely did it in terms of the book. He completely, because he wasn't just disregarding her research. He's disregarding any of the research from other scholars that she's presenting in her books, on the account that that her take is fringe, and he thinks that maybe she's coasting on her good looks. To that effect, like, it's even worse than that, because Falk is like, yeah, I read her book. God, she's got some just crazy shit in there. It's not just hers. She's done research in some of those areas, but she's presenting research from other people in these fields. There's a reason she's doing that, because she's presenting this kind of stuff to a lay audience, to just a general audience of non-experts. And so he's like, no, we can just toss that out, because I think she's motivated in a bad way. She's not a good scholar, and she's just coasting on her good looks. This isn't good. You should just disregard it. There's other research in her book that's not hers, and he's discarding that too, because he's literally throwing out everything because of the messenger. And I think that gets missing. That goes missing from his conversation, or his initial criticism. Digital Gnosis reifies the systemic power asymmetries was just posturing BS from Dan. I don't think it is. If anything, people who are concerned about misogyny here are reifying misogyny as synth. I don't know what that means. I think this is what wound me up. The performative appeal to the in-group. I don't know that this is I don't know what in-group he's appealing to here. I mean, I understand what he's talking about, but McClellan is a linguistics guy, so he's done lots of videos on this. If you followed other videos, if he's appealing to an in-group, he's appealing to people that have watched his other videos and know that some of his research gets into, wrangling with linguistics, which is a jargon-filled nightmare of an academic discipline. I mean, no argument there.
That this only has currency because she's attractive. And in this non-apology, he tried to suggest that his main target was the audience for Professor Stavrakopoulou's scholarship, not Professor Stavrakopoulou herself, but he also did accuse her of playing to that audience who is interested in her work only because of her attractiveness. Now, Dr. Falk has absolutely no data whatsoever to support that conclusion. That's just an assumption that he makes because he's internalized those misogynistic assumptions about successful women, and because he knows that it will play with his own audience, which is made up primarily of folks who are interested in apologetics regarding the Bible. Now, I could talk about the awards that Professor Stavrakopoulou's scholarship has won, or the departments that she has headed up that have been ranked the best theology departments in the UK. And I could talk about other accomplishments. And I could talk about how Dr. Falk has had to seek out predatory publishers that lack peer review in order to get his work published. But really, if you want to know if this is misogynistic or not, listen to women. And if you can't appreciate that, or if that makes you upset, QED, I guess.
All right. So that was, and as far as I know, that was his last word on that. I don't know if he ever brought this up again. But yeah. So I thought that was a pretty good take, other than I kind of disagree with just a little bit marginally with some of the stuff, the idea of discarding all of her research because she's trying to play it off as attractive. And I think that he said that was coming from Candida Moss. I'm like, that, yeah, if only that were the case, but that's not the case. He's actually advocating that people throw out the book, just disregard it. And it's filled with research from lots of other people, including I'm sure, a lot of men. But hey, it's fringe and she's weird. I think she's a waste of time, and she knows what she's doing, and she's playing along with all this kind of stuff. I'm like, okay, yeah, whatever. So I think McClellan did a pretty good job here in kind of defending this. Now, later on, this comes up again. That was kind of it. And I think let's see. Yeah, in quotes, I'd hate to say anything unflattering about Dr. Falk, especially given he's a drunk. Yeah, that was a very, I caught that too. That was a very passive aggressive move on his part. Like, oh, I'm not going to say that he, can't get anything published mainstream, but it's like, oh, you sassy bitch, you, Dan. Whew, sassy. But I agreed with just about everything he said. I don't really think that it was posturing at all. I think Nate is trying to say something like he's trying to build up his. He was trying to build his public online profile. He, as in Dan, as a YouTuber, involving himself in the drama was his shot at establishing himself. I think he was already established before this. I don't think this rocketed him to anybody's attention. In my view, he's trying to perform an academic sounding speech that hits all the right political notes for the atheist audience, ACA types he wanted to acquire. No, I don't know that that's true. None of those terms seem to be like I kind of inhabit a lot of these kind of left, like not the socially liberal ones, but at least the left wing ones, and these aren't really buzz terms in that. So unless somebody's hanging out at some, I don't know what group that is, but who knows? Maybe it is. Maybe it's all for the clicks. I'm not sure. But even if he was motivated by clicks, I still think he made good points. Dan made good points. I think his criticism was on point, and I think it needed saying. So, but anyway, my point isn't to, like, Dan can defend himself or whatever, and I'm not on first name basis with him or anything. McClellan can do his own thing. My issue was the way that Pinecreek wanted to present this after the fact, and I don't see, and I'm usually pretty sensitive to it, I don't see how Dan's stuff rises to some kind of like hand-wringing, pearl-clutching, lib-cuck white knighting that a lot of like sort of your sort of 4chan, 8chan trolls would just freak out about. Like as soon as something comes up, a guy uses the term misogynist on another guy, knives come out, especially if that guy is in academia and looks and sounds like Dan McClellan. To be honest, if Dan McClellan, was an even, a broad-faced guy with a massive beard, and did all of his YouTube things from inside his, his tractor shed with his axe, I still think that as soon as he accuses another man of misogyny, the knives come out. It's just this weird thing. So. Pat says, as one of Stavrakopoulou's former graduate students, Dan is in a unique position to comment on this topic. Yeah. Nate says, look on his social blade at his channel rankings and the dates. You want me to track down the moment he started I'm not saying that he didn't get followers for this. I'm sure he did, but his channel was, it was growing at a pretty good clip. So was his Twitter feed. So, but okay, so it got him a lot of followers. Is that bad? Did he know that was going to happen? Did he do that knowing that this is going to get me views? Digital Gnosis, it sort of sounds like you're saying this dude you're implying he doesn't actually believe this. He just did it for the clicks and the views and the subscribers. How do you know that? And if you say because he got clicks, views, and subscribers, don't bother. That doesn't make sense. I will say that to whatever extent Dan is unfairly capitalizing on the drama, Doug is doing the same but worse. Yeah, I don't know. From what I understand, and someone could maybe track this down, these guys were talking about this on Twitter. This was going back and forth on Twitter because this happened right after it. Not this apology one. This was like a month later. His reaction to, because that live feed, I think that it was somewhere around like January 22nd. It was, and this stuff happened very, very quickly. Like this got kind of heated. So the idea that this was floating out there long enough for him to, like, it's easy for us now to kind of look back and say like, oh yeah, well, okay. This kind of flared up fast. It kind of went away even quicker. Well, kind of. But the next video I'm going to get into here, I'll stop this screen and. Yeah, and great nice. I don't find appeals to motivated reasoning very convincing in this case. His account of misogyny, an unscholarly critique, rings true to me. Yeah, and see that's the thing. I don't know. This is the thing that gets to me. Like we don't know that Dr. Falk hates all women. You don't know his heart, but somehow you do know that Dan McClellan virtue signals to get clicks. Like you're doing the same thing. You're just doing it to the other quote unquote team in this. Like even if here's the thing. Let's say that, and this is probably really should be my final point on this. I don't care that David Falk hates or does not hate Dr. Stavrakopoulou. There's a very good chance that he does not actually hate her. That's not the point. What I do know is that he has a particular audience, and his audience likes to hear shit like that. And his channel has been around long enough, he knows that. So when he repeats things like that, he usually gets a big old clap on the back for it. So if he does not actually if he's not actually being motivated by this, and I think to an extent, some subconscious level, he is. The shit that he said was sexist. If it doesn't rise to the level of misogyny or sexism, why is he talking like it? And that's what he's putting out there. He might not be motivated by actual misogyny and sexism. Then what is he motivated by when he's using that language to describe that woman and her work? If I campaign for political office as a white supremacist to appeal to white supremacist voters, I myself am not a white supremacist. I don't have any racial animosity towards any group, but I pretend to for the votes. I'm a fucking racist. So I'm virtue signaling to racists to get votes. That's just as bad as actually being the true believer to get those votes. I'll leave it there. All right, let's find out. This is the last one. Okay, so sometime later on, Doug had a show going on, and there was something going on between Dr. Kip Davis, who also has a YouTube channel, and Rob, who is a guy that runs a channel called Sentinel Apologetics. I don't think I've ever talked with Kip Davis. I don't know that I've ever met him online. I have talked with Rob before in the past. It seems like a fairly nice guy. I've talked with him once or twice. But it's been years, probably 2 years since I last talked to him. I don't really spend a lot of time on his channel, but I know he's kind of in this. I think Nathan from Digital Gnosis and Pinecreek and others, they know him, right? And Kip Davis obviously knows him too. Well, I think Kip Davis and Rob had some kind of dispute going on. And so, and part of it circles around the Stavrakopoulou, her book, claims that are made in her book, God, an Anatomy. And so it kind of overlaps into the Falk thing. So where I'm at right here in this video, Kip Davis has joined Pinecreek on his show, and Kip Davis has a clip that he wants Doug to play. And it's from when Doug was talking with Rob from Sentinel Apologetics, you know, a day or two before or whatever. So.
Here we go.
So
cool.
Here we go.
How someone can be so
You're right.
fringe and
I
yet so
can't hear it.
popular, and so it must be because of her looks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's the basic gist of it.
Can you do something for me quickly, because you have the abilities of like putting stuff on the screen?
Mm-hmm.
Are you aware of her reading of Isaiah 6 verse 1?
No,
Just to give you an
I'm
example.
not aware of almost
Okay.
anything she's said.
Okay, this is going to come across as wild to you, but if you can put on the screen Isaiah 6:1, any translation would do. And I want you to read it out for me, and then but the last word, or the last second or third last word, I want you to insert the word penis in there.
Penis.
Literally, I'm not kidding.
Okay.
It's in her book. Just verse 1.
Okay. In the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord high and exalted, seated on the throne, and the train of his robe filled his penis.
No, okay. The
penis.
word for robe, according to her, is penis. the train of his penis filled the temple. So according to her, God, the God of the Old Testament, this temple is not a physical temple. It's a heavenly temple, which means if you think about it, the temple could be this vast, huge temple. Which means then that his penis is filling out the entirety of this heavenly temple. So the Israelite God has a gigantic cock. That's
That sounds.
Francesca's argument.
I would laugh, but I can't hear anything.
And is there any? How does she come up with that?
No biblical scholar agrees. She only relies on one paper, a paper written by Esslinger, who was relying on G.R. Driver's conjecture, because the word is used for robes more so for women, where there's texts that speak about lifting up the robe of a woman to expose her genitalia. And this one dude was like, oh, even though it's speaking about female genitalia like in a derogative way in those other texts, maybe since that same word is used over here, maybe this is speaking of God's penis. And she runs with this. And then you have basically White Knight Syndrome, one of her students, Dan McClellan, who runs to her aid to try and defend her on this.
It doesn't sound like I mean, if Dan knows anything about social media, and I think he's a little bit savvier about this than probably I am, him quote unquote running to her aid, if it looks like that, it doesn't do her any favors. To me, I think this kind of shit is weird, because if I have an opinion about this and I want to share it, and it involves one person, I think, being unfair or mistreating another person, usually just rhetorically, but enough that, like, hey, I want to comment on this, then the easiest thing for somebody like Rob to do, or Doug to do, is come out and tell me that the reason I'm doing it is to get points with the person I'm defending. That I'm not actually, you don't actually care about what happened. You just want to get laid. Or you just want to be friends, or you want to look virtuous, the classic virtue segment. You want to look virtuous to your other, like, okay, that's the only reason that I'm doing it. I mean, at some point, people need to quit doing this kind of shit. Like, I understand trying to examine motives for why people do this kind of stuff. It's really easy to put together a lot of these videos to do this kind of stuff, but you don't always need to, like, assume that somebody is up to something 2 or 3 levels deeper than what they actually are. Like, they may just, like, they saw something, it triggered some, I mean, this is why Doug does this stuff. He watches these videos, they trigger the dopamine, and then he goes on and does commentary video about them. Other people are doing the same thing too, they just might have a different take. So this idea of trying to, like, wrestle, oh, well, here comes Rob is doing it, here comes Dan white knighting. He doesn't need to white knight for his former teacher. I didn't get the impression from either video that I played here. I don't think he's covered any other videos on Stavrakopoulou or on this issue. I don't think she ever took it on. I don't get the impression that he's defending her, other than he's criticizing Falk for being a misogynist. And I think, and so the idea is like, oh, here he comes with his sword and shield in hand to defend her from this angry guy. No, that would be easy. That would be easy to dismiss if he were actually doing that. He's not doing that. He's coming out like, this clown came out and just decided to make this about her looks and her research being what he feels is bad, even though this isn't her field. I'll also point out, Rob, this isn't Rob's field either. And Pinecreek has admitted, like, Pinecreek doesn't get into this kind of stuff. I know he's educated in, I think, sciences or something like that. And I think he has a job in finance, but he's admitted he's not even interested in this stuff. Not at least not enough to, read into it. He's not going to pick up God and anatomy and even read that book. So the scholarship that Rob's talking about that might underpin some of the stuff that Dr. Stavrakopoulou put in there, Doug is going to be less inclined to get into that stuff. And he's admitted it, and there's nothing wrong with that. He's not interested. Don't worry about it. But Rob is just trying to say that, like, oh, okay, well, she's got some weird stuff out here. Falk mentioned that, and here comes Dan to defend her. No. Dan Hart didn't spend as much time talking about the fact that Falk got the research and the study wrong, that he got that information wrong. He's getting the scholarship completely wrong from the jump. That gets dismissed quickly. It's the part where Falk personalizes it and makes it about Dr. Stavrakopoulou being motivated to coast on her looks. to play window dressing.
reading, and there are other scholars got wind of this, have written blog posts against this sort of rendering and saying, yeah, why is Falk being treated like this when this is fringe? Like, what Christian anywhere, even critical scholars, would say that Isaiah was describing God?
That's a problem right there from Rob. What Christian would think that that's what they're actually talking about? A Christian from a theological position, going to church, obviously isn't going to. But there's more than one way to read these books, and it's obvious from if the differences between the things you get from believers and the things that you get from biblical scholars, whether they're believers or non-believers, they're very different things. So I don't know what Rob's trying to do here. Like, what Christian's actually going to sit there and think that this is what was meant? That was talking about his dick. Based on how we read it today, no one's going to think that that is. That's not the point of that research.
God's gigantic penis filling the temple.
Okay, that's it.
All right. So you got through his whole explanation there.
Yeah, I'm going to write to 338.24.
Josephus, do you think this being made a big deal might actually gain Falk a bigger following in the long run? Well, first of all, I can't make it a bigger deal than it already is because I'm a tiny channel. This was already a bigger deal back when it initially happened, back when it flared up, and amongst relatively small channels. They're much bigger than mine, but they're still relatively small compared to like the biggies out there. Pinecreek and Dan, I think, have tens of thousands of followers, but they're not in the hundreds of thousands yet. Yeah, I don't think this is going to make it a big. If anybody gained followers on this, it was back when it happened, back when it was at its flashpoint. I'm only covering it now because I procrastinate a lot, and I just hadn't gotten around to doing this one, and I wanted to because this one was constantly. I kept hearing a lot of really dumb things and a lot of talking past each other, and probably going to get into some of that here with this Skip Davis one because I really haven't watched this that deeply. So we'll see.
Okay, good. So I think right away, because the question here had to do with
Fringiness.
whether or not what?
Fringiness.
The fringiness. Yeah, what does that mean? Like, I think it's important for everyone to understand what I think it means in particular, and what I would say biblical scholars understand to be fringe. I know at one point the other Australian.
Isn't this all old news anyways? Or was there some new development? No, I don't think there was any new developments. I think this comes up every once in a while. This will be one of those things where certain people who are inclined to take like McClellan's take on David Falk as white knighting or virtue signaling or whatever are going to remember him for that and will throw it back at him as if it's an own. So it will come back in that sense. Have there been any new developments? No. And as far as I'm concerned, the only thing I think that's worth really talking about this, because Stavrakopoulou, like I said, I don't think she ever mentioned anything about this. I don't think she ever called out Dr. Falk. I don't think she cared. She did not give this the time of day. Most of the people that ended up commenting on this one way or the other were offended by the rhetoric that David Falk was talking about and wanted to say something about it. Or, and like in my case, the aftermath of this was somebody like Doug trying to say, well, what David Falk is trying to say here, what Dr. Falk was really getting at, is just that the BBC hires attractive people. Is that so controversial? No. I mean, TV is a monstrous industry with a lot of superficial people, and yeah, they'll put attractive people on there. But that's not what he said. The only way that you can get to that being his primary point is if you leave out almost everything else Dr. Falk said about her knowing this, and she's not. There's no way she's not doing this. Like, she's manipulative. She knows the she knows the score. She knows she can get on there, and she knows her work's atrocious. Like the fact that even during his criticism, he goes from like saying that I don't think her work is very good, I don't have a high opinion, to then describing it as atrocious, gives you an idea of the kind of the arc of rage he goes through just in that short response to his questioner. And yet, despite the fact that he's and not only that, but there's a kind of an unhinged quality to what he's trying to actually connect this to. Like, wait, who's doing this? Is it she doing it on her own? Or is she doing this in concert with academia? Or are they doing this all with the BBC? Like, who's actually perpetrating this shallow front to present this quote unquote fringe, atrocious scholarship, which it's not fringe or atrocious, and it's not just hers. All of this was misrepresented. And then it wraps up one of the like, she knows she's doing this. She knows she's hot. She knows who she's teasing, that kind of shit. I mean, to me, it's a slam dunk. You watch that thing, it just comes across as creepy as fuck. And I think it'd be kind of weird if you're looking at both of them and trying to do this. Like, I think both sides are out of control here. No, they're not. If you think that Dan McClellan characterizing what Falk said as misogynist is going overboard relative to what David Falk said about Dr. Stavrakopoulou, I think you've missed the plot. So we'll see what Kip says here. Because now they're talking about the nature of this stuff being fringy.
And Guy and you and Rob agreed that fringe could be kind of cool in the vernacular. I assure you, in scholarship, it's not a compliment. No,
Unless you're right.
Biblical scholar. What?
Unless you're right and everybody else is wrong.
Well, yeah, but if you're fringe, if your
Galileo
position is
was
being
fringe.
labeled fringe. But listen, if your position within my field is being labeled fringe by your peers, that means that everybody has looked at it, everybody has read it, everybody has examined it, and they have rejected it. So,
yeah, he's putting out a pretty good standard here. Pat writes, Dr. Stavrakopoulou is the department chair of religious studies at the University of Exeter. It's far below her to even respond to Falk. She'd be punching down in the extreme. Agreed. And I did miss one from you earlier, Pat. Spatchak, are you going to watch those videos you have saved from January 6, 2021 and get up to speed on current political events in the U.S.? Why? Did something happen, Pat? Can somebody tell me what I miss? Yeah. Crow, Many Clouds, Jefferson. Keep saying BBC and Jill will appear. Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, also update on that. That dude keeps emailing me. He just keeps sending me emails, and they're getting crazier and crazier. I'm trying to collect the ones and save the ones where he uses phrases like "last warning," "stay away from our children." He's lost his mind.
And yeah, I will agree that there are occasions where fringe positions eventually turn into something that's accepted. Maybe not even mainstream, but certainly it enters
like
the
in 1970.
This is
in 1970. Moses existing would have been not existing would have been fringe, right?
No, I wouldn't say that. No, I wouldn't say that.
Okay.
No, I would say that it was probably on the line there earlier. Yeah, you could probably say
1950 for sure.
I think so. I think what I would say is more recently, we have an example of a handful of scholars, Philip R. Davies, the so-called Copenhagen School, which includes like Thomas Thompson and Paul Lemke, and there's a handful of others, have proposed this idea that the entire Hebrew, like virtually everything within the Hebrew Bible was written in the Second Temple period, and that nothing, it doesn't describe anything historical in Iron Age Israel. So, and this certainly was a fringe position not that long ago, maybe 30 years ago. But yeah, it's one of those things where it's not even it's certainly not a majority position, but it's at least entered the conversation now where scholars are kind of talking about it.
What did you just say? It's not a majority position?
No, it's not.
Okay, but you would say it's not fringe.
It's entered the conversation. So once a position is entered the conversation, you can't call it a fringe position anymore. That's my opinion.
So
fringe positions basically are those that have been looked at by scholars, rejected by scholars, and fringe scholarship is stuff that never gets cited. You've worked in academia, haven't you?
Yeah, but I would say that then this whole thing with Dr. Falk is just a matter of definition of what fringe means, because he might not define it the way you just defined it.
Well,
it doesn't matter. I mean, if you're just defining something as fringe, I'm pretty sure that it could be taken from Dr. Falk that he's saying that he said it was fringe and then said it was atrocious and said she was a poor scholar. He doesn't have much respect for her. He didn't use the actual term poor scholar, but I mean, that was very much implied. He didn't take her seriously. She doesn't present herself seriously as a scholar or as a serious scholar. A fringe and then atrocious. It doesn't sound like if it's fringe atrociousness. It kind of sounds like the kind of stuff that everyone in academia would just turn their nose up to and be like, nope, that's not a thing. Like it almost like flat Earth.
He should know better, because he's in the field that I'm in. Well, or a tangential field. So it's what I will say. It's certainly not a compliment.
But if he
I-
were here and if he were to define fringe as the vast majority don't take this view, if that was his
Yeah.
definition,
Yeah.
was he right on this passage?
See, I'm not even sure about that. I don't think it's a majority view, certainly.
But Falk wasn't talking about that. Falk didn't get into those specifics. Rob did. Because Rob, in the clip that they showed, Rob was talking about that specific Bible verse or verses.
Not a majority view, but it's a view that is absolutely being taken seriously. And I think it's what I would classify as it's in movement. So, and some of this is going to happen just by virtue of demographics, right? Older scholars who, as they pass away, retire, stop writing, and are replaced by younger scholars, I would bet that as that continues, this is a view that's going to gain more and more traction. But we should talk about why this is not a fringe, why we should take this seriously. And I did want to say one other thing. So, and it's unfortunate because I don't want anybody thinking that I am trampling on the grave of Michael Heiser, who was an excellent popularizer of biblical scholarship. He seemed like a really nice man. I know a lot of people adored him and loved his work. I am not one of those who loved his work. But I think it's important to point out that very many of Michael Heiser's positions are certainly fringe by the definition that I've provided. So, it's
Oh, I should clarify. No, I'm not entirely ignoring them. What I'm actually doing, and I don't know that he's going to watch this because we're 97 minutes deep into this, so he just doesn't have the patience for this. So I'll let the audience know what's been going on. He keeps, he'll be watching a video, and I'm sure most of his stuff is like these. It's like these really like kind of hardcore right wing takes, shorts and stuff, and he will share those out to my email, my jeffersonspatchcock@gmail.com. And I started getting like he would send like one every month or so. Like these started a while ago, but now it's getting quite. And he'll send like one morning. I think I woke up to like 4 of them in a row. He must have been, I don't know if he was on the toilet for a long time and just going through, really getting ratcheted up with the cranked up on the right wing takes. But he shared 4 or 5 of them right in a row. And I realized that like the way YouTube's algorithm works, you could watch 90 left-wing videos and 2 right-wing ones. And the next suggestion that you get is for some red-pilled manosphere thing talking about how women need to be barefoot and pregnant in the kitchen. I'm exaggerating a little bit here, but it seems like that's how the algorithm tilts. It's nasty. So I'm like, I'm not watching this. And half the time he'll send me stuff from like Epoch News or stuff like that, that Epoch TV or whatever. And that the newspaper owned by Falun Gong. And I'm like, I don't have time for this. I ignore the videos he includes in his emails. I read the title of the video that he sends. I go into YouTube. I find a left-leaning one on the same topic, usually like an explainer or something. So if he sends me some hot take on abortion, I'll go and find like an explainer video, an old one from like Planned Parenthood or something like that, as an example. I don't know that I've actually sent one of these, but and then I'll share that out to him. That way, if he actually does click on those, maybe that will start changing his algorithm a little bit. Maybe I'll de-radicalize him. inadvertently, indirectly. I'll let the algorithm educate him and sort of massage him out of it. But like I said before, I think I could throw thousands of them at him and it's not going to matter because he giggles along to like 2 Ben Shapiro videos and it's it. That's over. Everything gets replaced with, if you're a real man, you eat nothing but raw steak, and don't wash your butt, and soap will make you gay, that kind of crap, just insane nonsense. That's the kind of stuff getting dumped into Jill's eyeballs through his YouTube feed. Anyway, yeah, I went too long on that. Let's get back into this. Jesus.
It's we all kind of pick our favorites, and some of us pick better than others. So, yeah, let's just maybe get into this and talk first about what the text of Isaiah 6 verse 1 actually says. So first off, Stavrakopoulou's book, God and Anatomy, this isn't an academic work. This is a popular book. So it's going to be short. If this is our only resource that we're looking at, it's going to be short of much of the scholarly discussion surrounding the topics and ideas in it. But I would suggest that, there's legwork behind it within the scholarship. So the passage itself, you read it. I'm going to read it in the Hebrew here. I'm not actually going to. I'm going to translate.
I think this is
from the Hebrew because I hate reading orally reading Hebrew. So in the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord seated on a throne, high and exalted, and his shulim filled the temple. Now, the whole passage is straightforward, but for that one word that I didn't translate, shulim.
So,
and this is.
I should have gotten more time caps out of this one before, because I played the one with Rob when they played that clip, because they brought up this kind of fringe thing, and you can kind of see here. You can see that the Papa Pinecreek he's going down for a nap. This is how you put him to sleep, and I don't blame him. I don't blame him at all. I'm really interested in biblical scholarship, but if they start getting into, if we have to get into like semantics of like a Hebrew word, I just feel the strength being sapped out of my body. Like I could just, the desire to enter the grave starts to become overpowering. Like, oh no, not another semantic discussion of a Hebrew, word or something like that. Like, it's just not, I couldn't do it. I got mad props to anybody who can get through this stuff and learn ancient Greek and ancient Hebrew. Hell, even modern Hebrew is a chore. Hats off to them, but holy shit. So let me push this to the end because it starts getting a little heated. I'm going to get to this part where it's Pinecreek's take on the whole thing. Let's see what happens here.
I want to say this as gently as I can because, some people are easily offended, but I'm not really talking to you right now, so you can zone out. Yeah. But right. Whenever someone comes to the defense or aid, and I see an inconsistency between male and female, I actually view that as a form of misogyny. And I know I brought up Robert.
Kip's reaction, okay, so here's the thing. It's also misogyny to say, look, okay, that guy said something critical about that woman over there. All right. And me, a guy, I don't like what that guy said. This would be misogyny if every time a man spoke out critically of what the other guy said was automatically equated to and conflated with defense of the woman spoken against. I don't care that David Falk has a critical view of Dr. Stavrakopoulou. I know he's going to disagree with her scholarship, with the scholarship of other scholars that she presents to back up her general works. I know he's going to be critical of that. What I don't like is how he was critical of her. because his criticism was horseshit. It was lazy, ugly, sexist, chauvinist, misogynistic, horseshit. It wasn't a real criticism of any of the scholarship. And that was dismissed within just a couple of seconds by Dan. Like, nope. Here's some sources to go read some of the stuff she's talking about here. Here's some other sources to read for the things that you have here. If Dr. Falk had issues with this, he could look into this and ask about this and ask around. Instead, he just dismisses it entirely and then goes about it being about her personally leveraging her quote unquote good looks to bolster her scholarship, her stuff. That this gets her on TV. This is why she gets on TV, and this is why she gets all the attention. That is not a substantive criticism. Me saying something about that guy's criticism is not me automatically making the world an easier. That's not me being a chauvinist for her. I know that she can defend herself. In fact, I would bet a large amount of money that if somebody had to ask, like, okay, Dr. Stavrakopoulou, you will get $5,000 if you can create a more withering rebuttal to Dr. David Falk than Jefferson Spatchcock. I would bet on her. There is no way she wouldn't scorch the earth with him. It would be over. There's no reason to think that she cannot defend herself in any way in that case. She didn't even bother with it. But that's not the point. I'm not rushing to her defense because I have a disagreement with him. I dislike what he's doing and am pointing it out. So I flat out disagree with Doug here. If you followed this logic, this would mean that if you saw something like this, the only way you can maintain any kind of integrity is to never get involved. Not only not get involved, but to not speak your own mind about it if it happens. Like, to what extent do you enforce this? Okay, I won't voluntarily go out and make a reaction video to what Dr. Falk said about Dr. Stavrakopoulou. Okay, so I guess then I'm a person of integrity because I stayed quiet through the whole thing. Okay, 6 months later, somebody asks me about it. Hey, let's say that I'm Dan. Hey, Dan, I heard that one of your advisors was Dr. Stavrakopoulou. Funny that thing that happened 6 months ago between her and Dr. Falk, right? I mean, who's that guy? So if Dan talks about it at that point, is he virtue signaling? Is he white knighting for her? Does he have to avoid to what extent do we uphold this? Because these are weird standards that I just, and maybe there's something wrong with me. Maybe this is, maybe I have a personality disorder that's hitherto undiagnosed, or I'm a little on the spectrum or something. I do not get this bullshit double standard. If I hear somebody say some bullshit, I am going to call that bullshit out. It doesn't have to be in defense of the person that bullshit was directed at. I don't care. They already took care of their business. Dr. Stavrakopoulou took care of that when she ignored that shit. But I'm just a little guy with a YouTube thing, so I'm going to be like, yeah, about that. That's horseshit and nonsense and crap thinking. That's stupid. And here's why. You got the scholarship wrong. You got the person wrong. You implied that there's motives there that you have absolutely no way of diagnosing. And then on top, and to make the situation worse, Doug comes in with these weird farm boy takes. Well, you know what? It's actually kind of misogynistic to run to her aid at all. Well, it was misogynistic to assume that any criticism of Dr. Falk is quote unquote running to her aid, Doug. So way to score points against yourself. Anyway.
Price and Richard Carrier as examples of people who believes Jesus never existed, and they are called fringe all the time. And never once have I heard a scholar come to their defense and say, hey, look, I disagree with them, but we got to take their scholarship seriously. And then when Francesca does, talks about God had a penis, and then right away I see an influx of men predominantly coming to her defense, I think, well, wait a minute here.
When and how and why? What guys were coming to her defense because she said God had a dick? That's not even the claim that she made. The claim is that the way Yahweh is depicted in some of these texts was meant to be taken literally, as if he literally had a penis. And that's not her own scholarship. She's drawing from others. So what guys were needed to come in and defend that? He's leaving out the whole like sacrifice part too. Like if by guys he means Rob has an issue with the book, well, then Rob needs to go talk to some biblical scholars about it and not complain about this to Doug. Doug has admitted he doesn't care.
She's a big time scholar. She doesn't need people coming to her aid. She can just say, hey, we have an honest disagreement. I think he's wrong. He has his opinion. And I think she's actually said these things. And so I just view this as kind of, I won't say misogynistic, I guess, but just really inconsistent and weird. Do you get what I'm saying?
Do you think so?
Sorry to anyone that was talking to Warren B1000. He is blocked again. So
now I'll say something about the Twitter war at this point, because the one clip that we didn't play was Rob complaining about this other scholar on Twitter who was making fun of Stavrakopoulou's readings.
So he's getting into the Falk thing. I think this is the part that I want to say, and I should be able to wrap it up. But from Pat, Kip and I took 2 hours and went through the translation tradition from the Hebrew, Greek, Latin, Middle English, among a variety of translations. It's not simple. No. Yeah, it's not.
And then he got absolutely, talked down to by all these other people responding to her. And his interpretation, and I think Rob's interpretation of that, is because he dared to besmirch the reputation of a woman. That's not actually what happened. What happened was, so this is a guy who he's a blogger. He runs a blog. He and I actually overlapped at grad school by a year. We were at the same grad school for a year, and I poked him for this because, like, it was a small school. There was maybe 30 students in our grad program at its largest, and I have no memory of this guy at all. And part of me thinks it's because he must not have ever been there, because he runs a blog. He has a PhD in biblical studies, and he's writing a book review. He's writing a review of Stavrakopoulou's.
And I don't know that that's the case. I think he has a master's degree in like biblical studies. I think his PhD is in Egyptology. So I think Kip either didn't know or maybe misspoke there. I'd have to look him up again. Let's see. And of course, he doesn't have like a. Yeah, he received his PhD from the University of Liverpool in Egyptology. He holds 3 master's degrees. Whew, 3, man, you got to leave the academy. He holds a divinity degree and an MA in Near Eastern and Biblical Archaeology and Languages from Trinity International University, and a 3rd master's degree in Near and Middle Eastern Civilizations from the University of Toronto. His BA is in philosophy from the University of British Columbia. But his PhD is Egyptology. So he got some of that stuff in there's probably, like he said, there's overlap between Kip Davis and him as far as one of their master's degrees.
Book, but is encountering this stuff like it's the first time he's ever heard any of it. And it's shocking to him. And this is what he's tweeting about how stupid all this stuff is, because it's as if it's the first time he's heard this. And he's a PhD biblical scholar. The response was not, or at least from my perspective, much of the response was not, how can you say that about a woman? It was, oh my God, how do you have a PhD and not know this stuff?
Yeah.
Well, and in Dr. Falk's defense, it's because he doesn't have a PhD in biblical studies. Or he's got a master's degree in that with some background, but he went on into Egyptology. So that could be the reason why he's not familiar with some of this stuff and why he thinks it's fringe, which I think was sort of Dan McClellan's point. But
and that's that I have a lot of respect for. But if someone is having a knee-jerk reaction because she is a woman and feels the need to defend because she's a woman, like, it's 2023, we should be past that.
Yeah.
Like, and the fact that she's a woman should not come into play with the need to defend her scholarship. It's like, no.
And it doesn't. This is fantastic. Yes, everything that you're saying, Doug, I agree with, and that needs to all be directed towards Dr. Falk. He didn't really have anything substantive to say about her quote unquote scholarship or research other than that he's not a fan. And he doesn't take it seriously. He doesn't think that she's a serial scholar. And then ramps up to it's atrocious. And then he just thought that they were fringe, and they're not. And then it got misogynistic. Then it had to be about her looks and how she comports herself and how she, doing theology by cup size, little trigger phrases like this. Like, what does that have to do with anything in her scholarship? Like, she does, the implication being she does half-ass scholarship, but then because she's attractive, she gets called out on the BBC and they amplify her bad work. Where are the receipts for that? I mean, we know that she's gotten on the BBC, but you've said that you think that the scholarship is fringe, but you haven't demonstrated that it is. Others have come back and said, no, in fact, it's consensus scholarship. There's a lot backing this. Go back to studying hieroglyphics or something. Calm down. And then he makes it about her personally. That's the trick. Like, forget for a moment that this was Dr. Stavrakopoulou. Let's make this a guy, an older guy, and let's say that guy has a disease. He's got Parkinson's disease. And Dr. Falk talks about, I don't take his work seriously. I don't think he's a serious scholar. I think his takes on this stuff are fringe. And also, I mean, he's basically handicapped. I mean, and that, he's not like one of these people that come out there. He's got these handicapped issues. When he comes out there, he gets a lot of pity from the audience. So BBC knows that there's something there. And that's how he gets on these shows, because they can run this pity party thing off him. He's like Michael J. Fox. You see where I'm going with this? Like, we can just take this about anything personal and then just like degrade a person for factors outside of their control. Stavrakopoulou cannot help the fact that she was born female and remains, it continues to identify as what I'm assuming is a cis heterosexual female. I believe she's actually described herself that way. That's who she is. And neither could a person who had Parkinson's disease help that. And Fox criticism is making it about that and not about the scholarship. And now Doug's like, okay, well, if you're going to criticize him for not criticizing the scholarship, right? Sure. Is it hands off the other horrible shit that he said then, Doug? Is Doug trying to suggest that we can't talk about the other horrible shit that David Falk said, because then what that means is that you're getting dangerously close to sounding like somebody who might turn around and call David Falk a misogynist. You don't want to be that kind of guy, right? You don't want to have that look. Like, no, I don't care. I calls it as I sees it. Misogynist. There, I did it. Ooh, cancel me. What the fuck is this? These guys have this weird, like, we don't want cancel culture out here. It kind of sounds like you fucking do. It sort of sounds like that, because Doug's sitting here trying to say, like, oh yeah, this is like a Bill Maher kind of take, like, oh yeah, disagree about the ideas, but don't make it personal. You mean like Dr. Falk did? I agree. Now, can I talk about why I disagree with him making it personal like that, and why that was a fucking horrendous thing for him to say? Better not. You better just let that lie. I don't think so.
I need to defend her.
So
she's a scholar.
So who brought that into play?
The what? But brought what into play?
Stavrakopoulou's gender.
Oh, well, it started with Falk's super chat where he called her window dressing. But why do you think he said that?
So,
yeah, with a super chat. I wonder where that super chat was.
I didn't want to get into this. So
we don't have to if you don't want to, but I find this the real.
We won't, but
issue.
but I'll say this: you're a big fan of taking personal responsibility.
Yep.
And of suffering the consequences for your actions.
Yep.
Right.
Right.
So, I personally believe that. Now, I don't think. First of all, I don't think anybody should care what I believe, because I probably don't know enough about this, about, you know, the political component of this.
Pat writes, I'd really like to know if Pinecreek took the time to review and compare Stavrakopoulou and Falk's CV, academic publications, and conference presentations. You know what? I doubt he has, and I don't know. Yeah, exactly. I would think that if he wants to thread this needle, then he should know this a little bit better than he does, like the real comparisons between the two of them, especially if he wants to compare them professionally and the level quality of their research. Then yeah, he probably should know. I doubt he would, and my guess would be, well, no, I'm not that interested in what they study, and I think he would attempt that dodge. Now I might be being uncharitable there, but I think he would do that. Andrew, maybe don't equate being female with having disease. I wasn't. I was comparing the rhetoric. The idea of you could do the same exact thing with somebody who was being ableist as you could with somebody being sexist. It would be the exact same thing. Instead of talking about the quality of the research, you make it about a quality of them, and you decide that, okay, well, let's pick on the thing that I can identify easiest. For this person's case, it's just she's a woman, so I'm gonna ladle on the misogyny. With this guy over here, he's got a disease. We'll make it about ableism. He can't possibly know what he's doing. I wasn't trying to make a correlation between the two. I'm trying to show if you're going to punch down and get lazy with rhetoric, like Dr. Falk was clearly doing, what I'm wondering is if these guys would it be so bad for me to come in and say, hey, Falk, maybe if you've got a criticism against this scholar, maybe leave their medical condition out of it. I mean, they do publicly talk about their medical condition. It's part of who they are. You know, they're a big advocate for research and treatment for, you know, their Parkinson's disease. But you saying, well, I don't like their research, and also they're using their physical issue to bolster what he thinks is, you see what I'm doing? It's the rhetoric that I'm comparing. I don't think that there'd be anything. And if I said, hey, don't do that shit, I don't think this would be that controversial. I don't think it would. I don't think they would care. But the fact that it's a woman, somehow we've got this weird, like, these guys who are like, well, wait, isn't it misogynistic to come to her aid? Like, I'm not running to her rescue. I'm calling out this guy's rhetoric because he's being a jackass. This doesn't make sense. It wouldn't make sense if he was talking about somebody who had a medical condition and he just decided that that's somehow involved in it. It's a complete red herring. So, yeah, sorry for going off of that. But that's what I meant, Edger.
But I personally think my personal belief is that it was misogynistic based on the fact that this was, and whether it was a direct attack on her or the BBC, I think what it did was it encourages people, not everyone, but I think people can see something like that and be encouraged to dismiss someone's work because of these other things, which is what he was doing. He was saying she's on the BBC because she's attractive, ergo this is why her work is, you know, this is why anybody would ever read the stuff that she's writing, because she's popular, not because it's actually any good. And I think, I mean, she can look after herself. I mean, she wrote this very popular book and is, you know, it's selling like crazy. So she's fine. But there's a lot of other women in the field who, and you're not there. You're not in the world that I'm in. And when women in the world that I am in are telling me and telling others that there are problems within biblical scholarship related to gender and to the treatment of women and to taking their work seriously, I'm going to listen to them. So I'll say that much, and then I'll say one more thing about Falk. So first of all, to correct the record, he was not fired from anything. He didn't have a job at Vancouver School of Theology. He had his library card taken away, and then he had his professional affiliation with the Society of Biblical Literature rescinded. And these are the consequences for his actions. He said something unbelievably stupid on a public forum, and this is what happened as a result.
Okay, this is
now,
Andrew, if Dr. David Falk were actually Peter Falk, I think his channel would be doing much, much better. I mean, even I would be tuning in to see that. I mean, hopefully it wouldn't have some of his like, nasty asides and his crazy theology. But hell, even if it did, just to hear Peter Falk again, that'd be great. Now I'm gonna share this because he's done that. I'll keep that up. I'm gonna stop that screen and share what actually happened, because I had heard reactions coming from people saying that Dr. Falk was canceled, that this was out of control. The reaction to it was excessive, et cetera, et cetera. And this is what actually popped up. So this was a statement from the Vancouver School of Theology. Comments made by Dr. David Falk on his YouTube channel on January 22nd about Professor Francesca Stavrakopoulou, her scholarship and person, are in conflict with the ethos and express commitments of the Vancouver School of Theology. Thoughtful debate is an essential part of the academy, but this is something else. Dr. Falk has never been a faculty or staff member of VST. Dr. Falk is no longer a research associate, a non-remunatory and non-teaching position, which gave him access to resources for research and limited opportunities to share it. So that was his position there. He wasn't being paid. It was basically, that's what Kip Davis said. It's basically like having your library card taken. VST is a community that operates on Christian values, including care and integrity and relationships. Yep, that's it. So that's what happened. And then he said that scholastic group or whatever, they pulled his card too. So I did see comments from people like, okay, yeah, maybe what he said was crass, but that doesn't mean he deserves to lose his job. He didn't lose his job. I don't know what he does outside of his blog and his YouTube channel. I'm not sure what's going on there. I think he might be making a full-time go of that. It's a decently growing channel as far as I can tell. But yeah. So this idea, there were these accusations. Well, here's another person they're shooting down his livelihood. They're cutting him off from being able to, have a job and all that kind of stuff. Like, no, that's not what happened. Not at all.
Now, hold on. I'll say one more thing too. Vancouver School of Theology is well within their rights to decide we don't want to be associated with this guy anymore. Same with the SBL. So
yeah, I understand.
That's tough.
Yeah. The thing is, when I don't know if you watched to the end of that live stream, Gabe came on and we went through exactly what Falk said in that initial thing, sentence by sentence, and he ended up agreeing with all of it. But he said, but when you put it all together, it just really looks bad. But he agreed with Falk that you should not do theology by cup size. We're all agreed on this. It should not matter what you look like.
But
is this Doug admitting he doesn't understand how language works? If you take statements out of context and judge them one at a time, their meaning could change, and then maybe you could agree with it. Pile them all together and turn it into a narrative or an expressed opinion with a narrative built into it, and you get something different. And in some cases, like, we should not, he said doing theology by cup size is a bad start, as if that's what she's doing. He didn't have receipts for that. He just assumes that's what's going on. That's not a criticism. That's just him complaining.
But that's what Falk is doing.
No, but think about...
Nah, that is what he is doing.
What is he doing?
he says she's attractive. She's on the BBC.
Right.
That's the only reason why
He never said
her
only.
opinion is being taken seriously.
He never said only. He said, but do you disagree that looks sells?
No.
So you agree
but I don't
with
think
Falk?
that's the issue.
That wasn't see where Doug's going with this. He's going to try to make it about this other thing. Like, Aunt Jer, I consider myself very lucky having been able to get to know Peter Falk a bit as a kid. I wouldn't call us friends, but my uncle was acquainted with him socially. He was a great guy. Yeah, Peter Falk, by all accounts, was a very cool dude.
No, well, I don't. So yeah, this is why I didn't want to get into this, because, like I said, I don't know enough about this stuff.
Well, you do know that the science is in on this, that people who are better looking are more likely to listen to, and
that is irrelevant to what's going on here. That is irrelevant to this. He keeps trying. This was the part that really started to, because this is after, well after this had happened. They're kind of revisiting, I think a month or so later, and he's still trying to come around and say, no, Dr. Falk's point was that attractive people get on BBC, and that's and maybe that's a problem for maybe that's a problem for the scholarship or something. Like, no, that wasn't his point. His point was that she's not a serious scholar, that her work is atrocious. But because this is a reality for TV, she's doing this. She knows she's doing it. She keeps doing it. That was the important part at the end that Doug cut out of his reaction video. She's doing this. She's playing the system. She's manipulating people with her looks to bolster what maybe she knows it's bad scholarship. Falk didn't do that, but I mean, I don't know that it would matter. This is about her. Not about the BBC. This is not about TV preferring to put attractive people on camera. Of course they do. But you know what? If the entire population was flooded with people who were all just sort of generically good looking, do you know what TV would be interested in putting on? People with various deformities and stuff, because that would probably attract people's attention and get them to stop flipping through channels.
That's why advertisers use good looking people.
Yes, but we shouldn't be playing into that either as much as possible. Yeah. We should be trying to overcome that, and that's not what he's doing.
Well, he's just making an observation.
No, you're just being a ridiculous apologist now, Doug.
No.
Yes, you are.
Yeah, he is. I completely agree with Kip here. At this point, I don't know if anyone has seen it, but if you go back just recently. There is a guy who goes by the name Baked Alaska, not the Baked Alaska from like right-wing notoriety. If you followed any of the January 6th stuff, Proud Boys kind of shit, but he has the same username, and he's been calling in to Doug's channel quite a bit. I haven't seen all of them, but I've seen enough screenshots and stuff where I'll go back and look for a clip for one, or some segment that somebody tells me to check out, and there's if I scrub through, there's a section where Baked Alaska has called in. Now, Doug usually, if he offers up call-in time on his show, he usually does give preference to talking to Christians because, I mean, it makes sense. He doesn't want to talk to a bunch of atheists. It can turn into kind of like an echo chamber. So this guy's called in multiple times. He made a clip of this exchange. The exchange got a little awkward and a little heated. He tells this Baked Alaska guy that he doesn't want to talk to him anymore, that don't call into my channel anymore because we're just having the same conversation. You're just bringing up the same stuff. And it gets awkward. It's and honestly a little sad. I thought it was kind of like the whole thing is a little. Just watch it. It's a short. He's got a clip of it. I think he's proud of it, which is a little fucked up. But to each his own, I guess. I think he made a pretty legitimate enemy out of this Baked Alaska kid. Not that matters, but I mean, it's just kind of a shitty thing to do. He seemed to think that there's a part in the exchange where he said he doesn't want to continue having the same conversation with this guy and stop calling it a channel because all we're doing is just rehashing this. And here I'm seeing Doug. He is propping up a point in order to continue to have an argument with Kip. I don't understand why he's invested in this point at all because it's not a good one. Anybody, and anyone in the chat, please, and anyone in comments later, correct me if I'm wrong. Write into the show. Send me an email if you think that I missed this completely from Dr. Falk and that Doug's got like a stake here. This does not make sense. No, you just don't understand. He's talking about the BBC and TV being prejudicial towards, of course they're biased towards attractive people. That's who they want to put on the camera. That's who everybody wants to see. Okay, what about the atrocious scholarship and the fringe positions and the what about the academic disagreement parts that Pinecreek, like, see, at first it's like, wait, is it okay for him to be calling this stuff fringe? And it sounds like from Kip there's obviously a lot of stuff in the middle that I bypassed, but Kip's like, no, not fringe. So next, oh, well, the BBC only puts pretty people on there. So there, that was his point. Really? So his point wasn't that her scholarship was fringe because Kip just knocked that over. So now it's no, that his thesis was, there's science. There's science to back this up. Pretty people get on TV more, baby. Like, what has that got to do with this? Nothing. It has nothing to do with it. For Falk, that's evidence. Here's how I know she's all smoke and mirrors. Here's how I know that it's all about her looks and not real scholarship. Because TV is a shallow world, and guess who gets on TV? Her. Not greasy Dr. Falk over here with the weird ponytail and the goofy grin. But Dr. Stavrakopoulou, exotic Greek goddess, she gets on TV, but not me, right? Is that his point? If that's his point, what is Pinecreek defending now?
I think you agree with me.
Yes, you are. No.
What have I said that you disagree with?
I'd have
the moment when Kip no longer wants to argue this, like,
so I'd have to go back and listen through again. But I don't want to talk about this.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. And I'm glad we had many points of agreement on the child sacrifice thing, the penis thing.
Sure.
Can you imagine wrapping up a conversation? I'm glad that after all said and done, we're not going to talk about that. You said you don't want to, but we did agree about the child sacrifice bit and the part about the penis. Take it out. I mean, if you came into this conversation like, what the hell happened the previous hour and a half? I wasn't watching this shit. Holy crap!
We didn't even get to talk about Eve having sex with an angel and giving birth to Cain. But
yeah, well,
unfortunately,
the older I get, and now I've been an atheist for well over a decade now. The more it's I know this is part of your career, but it's just like it's harder for me to have interest in it.
Oh yeah,
because it's just so far removed.
I get that. Yep.
Yeah.
It's not for everyone.
No, it is kind of interesting, to think about these things, and but I don't really like. It's good to study history, but are we really going to repeat the mistakes of the early Israelites or the Canaanites? Maybe.
Well, I mean, if you kind of take into account that they were a viciously autocratic theocracy, America's working on it, sure. I mean, it just sort of depends. I mean, there's 33% of the population that's pretty much like foaming at the mouth fascists at this point. I mean, to the point where they're like kind of surrendering to the cult of personality around somebody like Donald Trump, who's not even competent, but they're so willing to have like the kind of weird strongman society government kind of thing. Like, sure, whatever, he says crazy shit, let's put him in place and rock and roll. Like if he were gone and people just had to like suspend their imagination, it'd just be like, oh, okay, well, God gave us these laws. It doesn't really matter who the president is or whatever, but then we're tilting right into like, into pure on Christian theocracy. Sorry, I'm ranting again.
But I doubt it.
Hopefully not.
I hope we don't start sacrificing our children.
Hopefully not.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't want to like body shame her. I was actually kind of surprised when I found out that I thought the hair went back, and then in one video I saw he was doing something and he turned around and it's just the tuft there. And I think I'm not judging it. I mean, it's his hair, he can do what he wants, but I don't as a person, as a man with a receding hairline with hair loss issues myself, I don't know why you wouldn't just buzz it down. Just buzz it down. Like there's no, you know, don't but that's just me, and I'm kind of lazy, but I think there might be product in there too. Like I just don't, I can't see myself doing it. I would just look at it and be like, no, just shave it. It's got to go. um I see maybe Maya agrees with me on this.
No.
Anyhow, thanks for coming
Cool.
on, Kip.
All right.
Take care.
Thanks for having me. Later.
See ya.
So that's it. And then I think Doug goes into talking about how he is an apologist and this kind of stuff, and kind of pats himself on the back. That's pretty much it. So yeah, my whole take on this has just been like Doug trying to really trying to stretch out some kind of defense for Dr. Falk, just to keep people away from from making allegations against him that he's a misogynist. And I don't understand why that's important. Like, if you have a distinction, and I'll leave it with this: if you think that sexism or chauvinism as terms describe better what was going on, the kind of language that Dr. Falk is engaging in when he's quote unquote criticizing Dr. Stavrakopoulou, okay, maybe you're uncomfortable with that. But the point that Dan McClellan made in the second video, where he's talking about this sort of idea that misogyny, there has been, and I've seen this, and I used to see this in right-wing circles quite a bit, especially at a college level, because I was still a conservative when I was in college, and so I would try to put myself in positions where I would get into discussions with this, especially with feminists. And somebody had told me once, like, no, the purpose of what conservatives are trying to do with the misogyny thing is to make misogyny an impossible standard to reach. That way, no one can ever be accused of it. If the only way you can be a misogynist is to be a person who hates absolutely all women, then you really couldn't prove that, and therefore no one could ever really be that thing. So now let's just ignore that and then work on something else, even though that wasn't the point of the word, and that wasn't really a standard that was meant to be out there. But that got picked up by enough, especially younger guys. Guys that were my age, and I see it more with some of these manosphere types, where they're just like, oh, well, I'm a misogynist. You think I hate all women? I don't hate my mom. Like, that's not what misogyny means. Like, maybe go read up on what feminism is. So, anyway. Simon Stress, he just likes Tintin a lot at Jefferson's Patch Guy. I'm not sure what that means. Tintin? Let's see here. Yeah, spite-based politics is awful. Yeah, I think some of the stuff too, like it doesn't help any kind of discourse if somebody like Dan McClellan wants to criticize something said by Dr. David Falk, like, and the defense is, wait a minute, Dan should be a lot more careful about accusing David Falk of being a misogynist. That's your first take, not, oh, well, and that usually comes with, okay, did David Falk say some clumsy things? Did he say some ugly things? Maybe he was inartful. Okay. So in the situation that we've got now, Dr. Falk is just a bumbling idiot who stumbled into misogynistic rhetoric, and Dan McClellan is actually the aggressive instigator and provocateur in this situation, because he went out and used a charged word like misogynist to describe Dr. Falk. So if we have to weigh the two, the real person who's the problem here is Dan McClellan, and anyone like him that would leverage the same title and criticism against Dr. Falk. Dr. Falk's just misunderstood. You just didn't understand what he was talking about. He was talking about, it's an academic disagreement. Oh, he doesn't understand no, okay, he's not in the same field. It was a criticism of media, of TV media. Yeah, so don't look over there. But Dan McClellan, you need to work on that reactive left-wing political stuff. Get your house in order, and maybe think about how misogynistic you might be when you weigh in on these issues for the woman. Like, this shit is designed to tell people not to talk about stuff. This is not helpful. And the weird thing is that this ends up getting used as some kind of like way to like supposedly help people get better at dialogue. It doesn't do that. It won't ever help people get better at dialogue if you keep score in these weird, fucked up ways. Oh, you just assumed the role of woke scold. Reduce your score by 50 points, turn around until you pass out. Just do circles until you get dizzy and fall to the ground. You're done. Like, yeah, no, I'm not playing anymore. That's not what this is. I came out here to say that Dr. Falk has a gross ponytail and shit opinions about women and biblical scholars, and I'm out. So with that, I think I will wrap things up here. Thank you, everybody in the live chat. For those of you who stuck around, I hope you enjoy the rest of your Sunday. To Simus Funk, who is in the audience, I hope to make it to your show later tonight. I do have a previous engagement. I may not be able to check in. I don't know how long you're going to be going, so I might unfortunately miss it entirely. But this thing was planned a couple weeks ago, and I can't skip out. So it should be fun. I think it's a birthday bonfire kind of thing, and it might go kind of late. So we'll see. Thank you, everybody that's here. Thank you, Maya. And I hope all of you have a great, I don't know how you feel about Memorial Day weekend. I don't know if it's going to be good, if you got the time off. If you do, regardless of how it works out for you, I hope you enjoy it. I have some time off, so I'm going to be back probably sooner rather than later to cover something lighter, like Darth Dawkins and trans issues. Yay. See y'all later, everybody. Take care. Be good to each other. See you next time.